Hi everyone, how are you guys? How's it going?
Good evening.
Good, it's great to see you guys. Um,
Hi.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say hi.
Okay, great. I'm gonna send you guys the public notice here, just in case you have not received it. Um, Second, or weren't able to see it, I should say. And were you guys able to look over last month's meeting minutes? Great, amazing. Um, do you guys have any corrections for me? Or does it look okay? Looks okay. Thumbs up. Just quick. Amazing. Okay. Thank you guys. So today we have a couple of things on the agenda. Dr. Trent has agreed to talk about a North End Black History or slash Black Heritage Trail. Then we want to talk about the Boston 400 logo stuff, which we discussed last week, but we want to bring up again. And then an open discussion where I'll talk about the other subcommittee and some updates from them and other topics that we might need to talk about. So, Dr. Trent, if you want to get started, the floor is yours.
Sure thing. Good evening, everyone. Great to see everybody here. I was approached by Ann Moritz, who works with a number of the residents of North End. And this initially was an ask to the museum itself about extending our Black Heritage Trail into the North End neighborhood. However, I thought based off of the work that the subcommittee is responsible for, that this would be an idea worth considering. So I'm going to share my screen, if I'm able, just to show you a map of the actual sites. And these are 12 sites relating to, including the Long Wharf, where slave ships came in, Cotton Mather's enslaved person's house, Sarah Roberts, who was the part of the early not Brown, Roberts versus the City of Boston, a school integration case, which was later used in the Brown v. Board of Education case, sites along the Underground Railroad. And this is not something people typically think of the North End as doing. What I was fascinated by was that these were a group of residents who came together and said, these are the stories in our neighborhood that we want to tell. This is the sort of Black Heritage Trail that we want to see. And I think that I'm presenting this to everybody for consideration, that perhaps there are other community groups who have begun to think through what sort of sites matter in their areas of the city. I was at an event last week, I want to say, and someone approached me about the fact that there is a Women's History Trail, and the idea was for it to come together around 2020, and then oops, yeah, COVID happened. So all the great centennial celebrations around the 19th Amendment got scrapped, but the work is still there. So I'm sharing this with everyone, and I'm just doing this at a high level because some of this they're not ready to fully roll out in terms of the locations and things like that. For us to consider as markers, are these, is this something that we create a series of special markers or recommend special markers around significant sites? Should we be investigating what other areas of the city have similar historic sites that people want to be integrated into the storytelling and into the 250th celebration? So this is really just an idea for us to begin thinking. I think the community has been thinking about these things for a while, and perhaps it's just us asking the right questions to people to see if what they would want to see and how that could possibly look.
Ryan, can I ask a quick question about some of the
Sure, for sure.
locations? My name is Dave O'Donnell. Thank you. I work with Meet Boston. The two that I see there, they're a bit outside of the North End, and I'm sorry if you mentioned this, but the one on the Greenway near Boston Public Market, and I see another one.
Yeah.
What are those two locations?
Because they didn't number them, and I'm not that familiar with Boston geography, so give me a second, I can look on the document. One of them might be Faneuil Hall, the other one, I'll have to get clarity because they didn't number the map along with, but I can get clarity as to what those other two locations are. I think the
Okay.
idea was, they want to link into some of the existing trails, Freedom Trail, Black Heritage Trail, but also as conversations have been, where else can people just go? What else can they discover about neighborhoods they know, but us history that is layered under what they think they know?
Thank you. I wonder if one is maybe someone else knows, the Zipporah Atkins house.
Yes, that's one of those. That is one of those.
Okay, because I know that's amazing, because I know the Greenway is actually endeavoring to build an actual structure, a replica. So
Mhm.
anyways, I was just curious if that was one of them, because when that comes to life, it'd be a great enhancement, because it'll be an experience for people to really immerse in the history and these stories we're trying to make sure are unearthed. So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any other comments? Okay, if not, I mean, I know that Highland Park was the most recent historic district. They're working on a walking tour. And it's pretty interesting. They have a lot of stuff in there. They have like the William Lloyd Garrison House. They have, gosh, I just did it not that long ago, but now I'm blanking on on everything that they've included. But it's architectural. Oh, they have like the Black Jesus statues. So they have things that are like architectural, historical, and cultural. So I think that that's something of interest to definitely the at least the historic districts as a basis. I know that's something that some of them are working on. And I'm sure that there are definitely organizations and community leaders that want something similar. So yeah.
I think this is wonderful, and Dr. Trent, I'm glad that I'm glad that the museum and you are at the center of this. I think one of the things I was wondering, and Hesse, maybe you can remind us, does this commission or this committee have the power, or as part of our charge, to validate? Is that one of the things? While I think we're kind of figuring out, if we will eventually, or if there will eventually be resources, I'm wondering if there is a way for us to think through how we give the stamp of approval somehow in this process. And then what would be the process for us as we start hearing about things in community and in all the places that we are, for us to bring them to this committee, or maybe there's a subcommittee of this committee that can maybe do some of the work of running it through a filter and make recommendations. So just kind of wanted to raise that up, especially as I imagine we get closer and closer, we'll probably hear about more and more people activating in that way. And how might we do that, or how might we figure out a time for us to discuss that?
Yeah. I mean, I know the ordinance says that the goals of this subcommittee will blah, 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 and by supporting the formation of historical trails and tours that extend beyond the downtown area. And it says within the first year of convening, the subcommittee shall produce an initial actionable plan for next steps in support of the commemorative events to fall between the time period that we have. So, I mean, I think it's definitely one of the charges to find these trails and to bring them forward and give them to the appropriate department, whether that be ONS in collaboration with neighborhood services and arts and culture and tourism and sports entertainment. I feel like that's probably what would be how we would get it activated, because it seems like we give the stamp of approval, but we also say, hey, these are the things that are happening, and we would like them to be legitimized or whatever in this way, and then send it off to other city departments to see what they say. See.
Yeah, it looks like Cara might have just said something similar to,
Yes.
what I just said. Like, how do we come up with a mechanism, either at this committee or, Suzanne, I know that you kind of have, city bones and knowledge, and like, how might that happen?
So with the Freedom Trail Commission, it's a state law that that there's a commission that reviews any kind of sites that are along the trail. It also limits the length of the trail. And there can be no less than 12 historic sites, which we're not under 12 historic sites. So maybe something like that could be put into place. But I think that a real community process would be really good. We don't want to leave anybody out or have anybody feel like, a site in their neighborhood isn't, is overlooked. Yes, Nat?
Yeah, it's complicated with trails, right? Because we have a lot of trails in Boston, but to my knowledge, really only two have some kind of institutional status, right? The Black Heritage Trail and the Freedom Trail both have a kind of quasi-governmental configuration. The rest of them are informal. And so it seems to me that this body can play a role in stimulating thinking about areas where there is an opportunity for a trail to connect numerous sites, and we can bring them forward. We can be opportunistic and receive suggestions that come from citizens, but I also think maybe we want to think together about where trails would be useful and be in the business of reaching out and finding community partners who might want to think with us. But as far as giving some kind of official status, it is noteworthy that there is really no official City of Boston historic landmark program in place right now. And it might be that we want to consider recommending that such a thing be created. I'm aware of this because one of the organizations that Revolutionary Spaces was formed from at one point ran a historic marker program. People still come to us all the time and ask, can we put up a landmark marker on this building or that building? That's not to say that every trail needs to be made up of officially designated sites, but there, if we're going to conduct surveys of historic resources in a wide range of Boston neighborhoods, then it seems like it would be sensible for us also to have a program to elevate the visibility of those particular locations. And that might help us in the process of identifying where trails are.
Nat, could you describe a little bit to the group how the Bostonian Society's marker program worked, if you have any institutional knowledge about that or files?
Yes, I can do that now, or
in.
I can do it at a future meeting. I mean, it was defunct by the time I became involved with the Bostonian Society, or it was winding down. But there was a partnership between the Bostonian Society and the Boston Landmarks Commission, and a range of historical advisors who tried to generate a list of unmarked, undesignated locations that had historical significance, where a placard could be put up that would describe in summary what the significance was. And some of it was the committee thinking about sites where there was a need, but there was also a vetting process when citizens came forward and said, hey, how about my building, or this building that matters to me a lot in my neighborhood. And it was not meant to be intersecting directly with the process of designating landmarks by the Landmarks Commission. It was really a different level of formality. But the idea was that there are all these structures hiding in plain sight that embody the history of our community, and people pass by them all the time without knowing about them. Of course, it's even more complicated than that, because most sites have like a layered history and have multiple meanings. And fortunately, today we have all kinds of other ways of getting that information out there. There's the opportunity to do something in a virtual space that would give people access to some of that history.
Do you happen to know who installed the signage and who paid for them?
Funds were raised by the Bostonian Society and held by the Bostonian Society, and the staff of the Bostonian Society um, did the lion's share of the writing of the content, which was then reviewed, vetted, signed off on, and then the ordering of the materials and their installation. And markers unfortunately come with maintenance costs, so one does have to lay in some resources in order to ensure that they're maintained.
Okay.
We got some questions.
Yeah, Dr. Trent.
So, two things. One, I think it's really important for us to come up with a process, because I don't want to become known as the person, like, if you give it to her, she'll bring it to the commission.
It's all you, Dr. Trent.
I do not need any more emails. So a
Yeah.
process of,
Call the doctor.
yeah, a process of some sort of way for people to know. And even if they don't have a formalized group, but they have an idea, like some people just know their neighborhoods incredibly well. I'm very astounded at the wealth of knowledge among residents who's lived there for a very long time. Saying, I know this about my neighborhood. Could this be considered? Just something for us to see where that community knowledge base is. And then to say, okay, we may not have a formal process in a year, but we could say, these are the ideas based off of initial outreach around what these stories, what this experience could look like. And it's both, people want a marker, they also want something digitally that they can take with them in their pockets. So think about the millions of people who are coming in, who are going to be walking around the city. Where can they go? Could they explore? Nat, as you were talking, the other thing I wanted to bring up is in DC, certain neighborhoods, when you go in like U Street, the U Street corridor in DC, you'll see this big sign that's almost a wayside that tells you where different markers are, right? So yes, you can do it digitally, but you can also walk up to, I think the corner is like 14th and U or 12th and U or something like that. And it'll show you where Duke Ellington's house was and all these other spaces. So there may also be a need to just put those in the neighborhood as well. So people have something to see the story and experience the history that's quite literally around them.
Could be a good project to start in ONS, because they know their neighborhoods quite well and their communities. So Kira and Kara, we've got you both raising hands.
I can go first.
Okay.
So I was thinking a few things. One, there is let me lower my hand. There is the historic structure report that was done, I think, in like 2002. That was done, I think, Noel, correct me if I am wrong, in conjunction with the Museum of African American History. It's done by Catherine Grover and Janine V. Da Silva. And it is a wealth of information. It is probably one of the more comprehensive kind of historic resource structure reports that's done about Black history in the city. So it's something I think we can like also consult, because some of that work has actually been done. And even, the creation of the North End Trail, I know that I was sent it and another historian was sent it. And so kind of we've been looking at it and like making recommendations about what should go, what's missing. But I think just kind of utilizing kind of a lot of this early history that was created would be helpful for all of us in terms of looking at some of the sites that have been pitched, because a lot of them actually have some research on it. So I can share that with the committee, so it's not like we're recreating the will, or even when community members come to us, we can kind of, also help build out some of those stories in really interesting ways in conjunction with community members. I think one of the things that makes me just a little bit nervous is that when they're community-led projects, like making sure that communities are actually having a seat at the table, and so that what they imagine, we can still kind of make that come to life if we agree to work with them. And so it's just something I want to put out there, that like I want to make sure that we then don't decide what is important enough to go on the trail. You know, or we have like a good, I think, rubric of how we do that, especially because, like, you know, some of this is just they've been doing their own research for so long and trying to get it passed. So I think it's just something I would want us to think about, and how to think about that strategically when communities bring their projects to us, because I think oftentimes a lot of the sites that they want have actually been rejected in other forms, or have not been deemed as important in other spaces. So kind of is this a commission in which we are then, you know, also trying to bring to light understudied sites as well, as opposed to kind of highlighting things that are a little bit more known. And then I think the third resource is the African American Trail Project, that I think is just also a great wealth of information that has over 200 locations already mapped out. Many of them do not actually have markers, but again, just thinking about how we can, if communities are coming to us, we can actually just kind of use a lot of that resources, the research that's been done over the last 20 years to kind of help make the cases for their importance.
Yeah, Kiera, I'll just add, the historic structure report was done by Park Service for properties that fall within the boundaries of the Boston African American National Historic Site.
Got it. Yeah.
So it's not extensive of Boston, but it is
Yeah.
a good start to understand the nature of what's included. But I think you're correct in terms of the ethics we apply here would be community curation ethics, and having that level of equity and figuring out how decisions are made.
Yeah. Huang?
Yes. Well, this the different trails, I am very excited about all of those possibilities, and definitely adding different things. I think if for Latinos, for instance, if we were to put some sort of trail, we probably wouldn't be able to go as far back, you know, as the African experience here and the other communities. There are a number of sites that go back centuries, you know, and I think I mentioned, like in the mall where we have the statue of Faustino, which promoted education and brought teachers from here to Argentina and so on. And there's a number of other things. But for instance, our growth here was in the last century. But in every part of history, even when they did the markers, which I attended many of them, it was the Masonic Trail, for instance, where they have, you know, Tyler, Marshall Street, and so on, the Union Oyster House there with the Union Street. All of those are Masonic things, and there are ties, and there are a number of Latinos that go back centuries. But it definitely has been under study, and there's a lot of little research. As a matter of fact, every time I mention something like this to historians, different folks, they go, oh, I always wonder what that statue was all about, you know. And recently, like so in my case, I don't know if it would be a trail, but just identifying certain sites that are of important significance to Latinos. And for instance, the Ted Williams Tunnel, right? That's of significance to Latinos. And you say, why? Well, Ted Williams was the son of a Mexican woman, but nobody knows about it, because for many, many years, in order to be listed, you know, in Hollywood or in sports and so on, you'd have to deny your mother. As a matter of fact, he did many times. So the woman was a volunteer with the Salvation Army, the mother, which I think in the future, I'm going to start some sort of award in her name. She was concerned about homeless and people that had, you know, needs of food and health care and so on. But for many, many years, there's a lot of documented things. He would deny this. It would never be said, you know, that his mom was a Mexican woman and so on. So, and also Anthony Quinn, for instance, who died here in Boston and did a lot of things. And he had to change his name, you know, to Anthony Quinn from Antonio Quiñones and so on. So, you know, there's lots of things like that that are very significant. And then in the last 80 years or so, the migration of, you know, the Puerto Rican community that was brought here, you know, as farm workers, and then the development of, you know, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and so on, that was a lot was done here. And of course now to East Boston and many other neighborhoods, you would have to see why and the historical reasons why so many people from Central America came, you know, from Colombia and Salvador and so on. And now you go there and you know, 7 out of 10 businesses have been developed and so on. So it's part of of our history also, which you know, we're celebrating the whole you know 400 years here. But there are a number of sites that go back centuries. The thing is that I need, you know, I already have a lot of this done. But maybe picking a few places, like for instance, I like to have maybe some sort of celebration or something with at the site of the Sarmiento statue, because that was an incredible story. The whole thing. The more I look into it, for a long time it wasn't welcome. Then it did come under James Michael Curley, actually brought it over and so on. And there's a whole history with James Michael Curley and his interaction with Latinos, right, in Puerto Rico. I don't know if you know, but he went to the convention as a delegate from Puerto Rico. You know, there's a lot of interesting and stories that can be told, but it shows that the contributions that so many folks made. And during the war of George Washington and so on, and the crossing of the Delaware, at one point they had no funds, and the lots of the troops hadn't been paid for a long time, but the, fundraising was had in Havana, Cuba, and San Juan, Puerto Rico. And due to the fact that they raised those funds, then they were able to come and, you know, train here in the Boston Common and so on. So there's a lot of historical connections going back throughout, you know, and but especially in the last 100 years. But I don't know how is there a way to connect? Like, for instance, I know that if we look at the South End, for instance, all the contributions that were made there, you know, Jorge Hernandez, Chico El Flaco, Felita Oyola, Chico Muñoz, and so on, you know, 50, 60 years ago and so on. So, you know, there's some markers there, Plaza Baitances and so on, so they can go back into the mosaic of history. You know, now I know that the mayor will announce that they might put a statue of Duarte over in Mozart Park. You know, and Duarte was, you know, the liberator in the Dominican Republic and so on. So I think, you know, somehow we can tie a number of these, JP, South End, East Boston, and so on, and then pepper it with the fact that Hispanics or Latinos, or, you know, it's a big blend, you know, the various people that they call, you know, Latinos and so on. But then we can maybe set something up. But I like to consider like having some celebrations like these, like maybe doing something at the site of the statue and recreating certain things. And so I have a lot of stuff on this. And then again, on the Masonic Trail, you know, from Joseph Warren and there's also some interactions there way back at the beginning. You know, all of them Masonic movements were not only Benjamin Franklin and the guys identified here with historic markers, but that was inspired by the French Revolution. And of course, it also happened in Latin America, Simon Bolivar and so on. And there was a lot of interaction there too. I don't know how we can weave this together, but it's all interconnected. And there's been a lot. So I like to explore that a little bit. So I'll take some ideas. Or
Yeah, I mean, I'll comment really quickly and then Kara can take over. There's a good opportunity to talk about the Caribbean, and have that as a branch because it encompasses so much. It encompasses the Black community, encompasses part of the Latino community, and then when you talk about Simón Bolívar, we can talk about Haiti. And their significant we have a significant large population here. We have actually somebody from it's in the 11 Names Project, but some person who was enslaved by the Perkins brothers, who was buried here, in like they came here in 1793 and are buried here. So there's like from the Revolutionary War, part of the issues with the Sugar Act was the molasses that they were getting from the Caribbean, right? And how they were setting up shop in Haiti and in DR. So there is a significant historical context for this community. For like America 250. So I think that there's a lot of value in doing more work into that and doing significant newer research, because the project that is in the bounds of Beacon Hill is great, but then I think people would be like, well, where's Malcolm X's house? And it has been a constituent comment that they would like to see these places have a plaque, a special 250 plaque or a special 400 plaque. So maybe that's something that we can think through and something that we can, that can be a product of this subcommittee. Kara?
I guess I was thinking, I'm sorry to interrupt. Like I was not thinking that we would do the things. I didn't know if that was our charge or rather a way to validate things that people were already having in place. Cause I think there's a clear difference between the two. I'm not sure. I mean, I know Kara's going to go up next, but like maybe that could warrant some discussion on this. I don't know if that's our charge to, is there a decision to be made if that is our charge? So I'll stop talking there. I kind of interrupted, but.
I think that that's a really important question. I also think there's just a reality of the timetable that we have and how to get things done, that we know are also going to require like money and buying things and like all of the fun material questions of like who's taking care of what after we put signs on things, like really important things. But I was just going to say, I think I'm not sure if that's actually the charge of this group, or if like, I think something that is really important that we could do that other people have already said is to just open a call to understand what's out there. And I don't know if somebody has this already, but even just like a outline, not like a geographic map, but just like a map of all of the efforts that have been underway and where they live. And I feel like in my time at the city, I've seen things kind of start and stop, and then someone picks them up. Some are university held, some are, just with volunteers, and just to get a sense of what's out there and what people have been working on. And then from that to present it back and say, this is already what is underway. And from that, we can say, like, these are the kinds of categories of trails that we should be thinking about. Like, here are some of the values or approaches in how we think about elevating things or making things quote unquote official in an ethical, equitable way. I do think that suggestions from this group about how that gets formalized by government would be extremely helpful, because not having that, I think, just opens the door to, for things to move forward in ways that are opportunistic. And then we kind of wind up with not having a place to hold those conversations. And without that, there isn't really like a transparent way to say, well, here's why this gets city resources and this doesn't, or this is why this is a priority. So I think for anybody who knows me, I hate the idea of suggesting more bureaucracy in the form of another commission. I really would love to avoid that, but some kind of body that reviews things going forward and how that might be structured. Like there's a lot to figure out there. So I think some combination of kind of collecting and mapping out the work that has been done and the ideas that have been raised, and then thinking about how might you know, whether it's plaques or adding to some sort of official trail. And official could just mean having government resources behind it, I think would be really, really helpful. And also that's not necessarily attached to historic structures, but also maybe like significant events or significant sites in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little, the ordinance is tricky in that it says that the subcommittees will be producing recommendations, but that the commission is here and tasked with developing and executing a plan to mark upcoming historical anniversaries, including but not limited to 250, 400, which to me sounds like the subcommittees will recommend something, the commission, lack of funding, whatever, we will also recommend for execution to relevant departments, whatever that might look like, or to, you know, to your point, to create another separate entity that exists beyond the duration of this commission.
Ari, if it's helpful, and I actually don't think it is helpful, but the state commission is having the same conversations. Like the subcommittees, like, you know, what exactly is our ultimate, not point here, because we're all aligned in the philosophy, but are we recommending? Are we executing? Are we playing like a fundraising, a marketing role? So it's actually like a really critical early question, and all the ordinances kind of like leave it open in my experience, which is not vast. But it's just interesting that you bring up that kind of, you know, insight, because it's like, yeah, it's happening at the state level too. And I think it's not uncommon per se.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Suzanne and I and Hennessy were looking at Philadelphia's, the city of Philadelphia's website. I think is Philadelphia 250, and not, you know, we were lamenting that they had a staff of 8 and they had a fundraising committee, et cetera, and like some actionable items and buckets. And so, you know, should we not reinvent the wheel? And maybe there's some things that other entities are doing to help us make that decision. I'm not sure. I think we're definitely smarter than Philadelphia, at least. So I'm not sure.
I would also recommend looking at what Virginia and New Jersey are doing. New Jersey has actually come out the gate quite a bit with some stuff and has been working on this a little bit longer. So I don't know a particular city. When I was at the last Common Cause meeting, those were some of the states that seem to have some really organized things that may be worth looking at.
Yeah, I sent some links, so if you guys want to look at it now or later, so you can see. I mean, I think this is a good pivot into the conversation about branding, and potentially us building our own website. I want to talk to Do It about it. But I had created a kind of a mock-up of potential branding ideas, but Suzanne and Amari said that we should maybe discuss what we would like the logo and the branding to say. Amari, if you want to give a little bit more context, I don't that would be helpful.
You know, and I think it kind of piggyback to the earlier conversation around, as folks start to activate, and you know, people, you know, all of us on here and others might hear about these things, and folks want to be a part of something official. And so, what does a stamp of approval mean? You know, one of the things that we were thinking about, you know, brand identity was part of that stamp, could be a part of that stamp of approval, and you know, because we're, you know, coming in at a later hour, what would be the best way to fast track some sort of brand identity? I know that Dave, you're on the state, Suzanne, they just released their brand identity Mass 250, working with Proverb, et cetera. And, you know, City of Boston, fortunately, has some internal capacity to do that. And so would it be worth our while, particularly as one of our charges in this committee, to start that process? And I think Hennessy conceptualized a couple of ideas that would be, if this group felt that they were appropriate, that would be run up to Do It which is the city's design firm that could jazz them up and represent them back out to us, and potentially more or other ideas as a start. And so that's a little bit of the framing of the conversation. And just because we were playing catch up, we understood that a better, more comprehensive process could be having the consultants meet with people and doing a longer process. But we felt like maybe there wasn't enough time to do that. And so that was one bucket. The second bucket, and I think a couple of us on here have had the conversation, how do we also conceptualize and think about our charges 400? And so is there a way for us to think about Boston 250 and Boston 400, or Mass 250 and Boston 400 as the same entity and utilize either two different brands or one brand? Could Boston 250's brand be a 400 logo? Or do we need to have two separate logos of the process? So that's kind of the rough outline of the conversation, some thinking behind it. Nothing is definitive, but we thought that this committee would be best suited to wrestle with that idea.
Mhm.
And if it's all right, I think with you, Hennessy, to kind of show some of the initial thoughts. And again,
Yeah,
these are
absolutely.
the things, these are just concepts, because I think with Do It, if you give them concepts, they can elevate those concepts. But if you give them nothing, it's going to be harder for them to, they could take something and turn it into something beautiful, but it's hard for them to take nothing and turn it into something.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll share my screen really quick. So I compiled, can you guys see this? Yeah, great. Okay, so I compiled the current like MA 250, America 250, Rev 250, and then also like Boston 350, Boston 200. That was Boston Rev 200. And then this is America Rev 200. And so I was thinking about the color scheme and the fact that a lot of the new ones are animated. So thinking similar for the Boston one, I was thinking about these like rose petals that become a star. So lineages of resistance is what I was thinking, because that encompasses the resistance then and the resistances that have happened, that afterwards and that are to come. And then this is just different color schemes, and I will press play so you guys can see what it does. Yeah, so it's like a simple animation that I was thinking through, just to have something for Do It to see. And so then for Boston 400, I was looking at the Boston flag and its official colors. So Boston 400, your stories are history. These are kind of just simple stickers that I figured might be something. And then this would be like a similar logo to the 250 logo. And then these are place markers. They look like balloons, they look like place markers. So something that's like you're in Boston, this is a historical thing, and you are here. So, sorry, oops. Okay, so something like that is what I was thinking. 100, yeah. Stop sharing.
So I guess one question would be, to start off, are there any comments about us taking the liberty to conceptualize things to run up to Do It? And then maybe a second bucket would be, is there any thoughts or feedback around some of the images? Do folks think that they want to take a moment within their own capacities to conceptualize something and bring it back? Or three, and because of limited resources of going outside of this group in this moment, the idea would be to solicit an outside group to create and conceptualize a logo.
quick question.
logos are hard, right? I mean, they need to carry an idea visually, succinctly. Like, I think some of the concepts that you've sketched here have real promise. The sort of place marker, like you are here, I think there's something there, but it feels to me like we're putting the cart before the horse to go to graphic concepts before we've discussed what it is that we're trying to communicate with this brand. And so from that perspective, it feels to me like having somebody from outside this group who has experience just facilitating a conversation about what it is we're trying to express, even if we give ourselves a real time limit, or like we're not going to do a sequence of 10 meetings over 6 weeks because nobody's got the time or energy, and we don't have we can't afford that amount of time. But even just have a scaffolded conversation like that so that somebody can take a core concept and sketch something feels like it would be important to me. But I do recognize the constraints, and I don't know if we have the resources to do that, quite apart from time.
No, I agree. I also think that there's 2 other committees, Hennessy, that would want to weigh in. We're just one committee out of the whole commission, so they might have the other commission or committee members, subcommittees might have a different idea altogether. But I think we should probably focus on our charge of making recommendations. Like we can say, make a logo, create a website. I hate to see Hennessy, you go through all this work to do all this, and then, where does it go from here? And you've worked so hard and are working so hard. So thank you.
Also, quick question: do we know who has the authority to define the brand here? I mean, is that a decision that this commission gets to make, or is it going to be?
I think it's the city.
Yeah. So. Right.
As a quick follow-up to that, and I'm sorry, Mara, I didn't quite understand. Either there is potentially internal capacity at City Hall versus going outside for a consultant creative agency, or like we would have to make that decision, not just this committee, but those are either or options and both.
Yeah, I think when when Suzanne and I saw this, we thought, we should definitely, everything that Suzanne said, we said in our earlier meeting, and was thinking about the opportunity of a creative agency doing this, but it sounds like there's no resources. But I think this question around, do we even have the authority to do it, is a very good question. And so we thought, well, let's at least bring it up to this committee, at least show the drafts and all the questions I think that we're gathering now. I think it'll give Hennessy some moments to go back and answer some of those questions. One, if we like the concept or not, cool. Who gets to decide on that? 3, do you have the authority to do that? 4, we would ideally like the creative agency and like to get as much input from the whole committee. Are there any resources? And I think those are the questions I guess if we're recording this, so we don't have to take notes. If I'm summarizing the questions I heard, those are the questions that I heard from folks on this group. So I feel like some of the things that people are saying, Suzanne and I and Hennessy thought those things, but we thought it was still worthwhile bringing it up to this committee to also get confirmation that those were the right questions.
John Borders, you have your hand up. Hi, John.
Yep. John, your hand is up. You must have something to say here.
He's probably trying to figure out the mute.
He's working on the mute. Yeah.
This is why I hate taking calls from the phone. I'm sorry, y'all. I've been off camera the whole time, so please forgive me. I feel like the old dude that I used to make fun of. I'm him now. I was trying to figure out if it made sense as we're having these conversations. And I don't know if I missed this when I was on mute or driving and losing the call. With Mass 250 already having a contract with Proverb and with them already putting visuals out, would it make sense for our stuff to be somewhat in alignment with what the state is doing? Or have we decided that we as a city want to move forward in a different direction and kind of not necessarily compete, but, you know, do our own thing as a subsidiary of different conversations already being had at the state? Is that some of what we're discussing right now as well? Or have we decided that we're going to go in a different direction regardless of what the state is doing, knowing they have resources committed, knowing they have an agency in place, and versus us kind of approaching this saying, this should be a drop down of what Mass 250 is, you know, like Boston or the concentration, because Lexington and Concord, like there are so many different pieces of this having the same type of conversation that rolling it into a larger Mass 250 with the drop down of Boston and so on and so forth, and these, you know, kind of significant locations and markers, would that almost make sense for us to pivot and do something off of the existing branding? Or based on what Hennessy has done, are we like, all right, we want to move in a different direction? I'm just a little unclear there.
I think those are good questions for us to capture, right? You know, I think those feel like some of the ones that the other committees should also weigh in on. And I think this idea of resources to go through a process so that Boston can assert its own identity, I think that's still to be determined. I think if we had it sounds like if we had resources, all of us would probably prefer for us to go through the process of making sure what we're coming out and our recommendations for values match the logo and then the actions behind it. I feel like that feels like what most of us are saying, John. So I think there was kind of some action items for Hennessy to find out on our behalf.
Do we have, to your point, Amar, do we have a deadline by which we are recommending we put these decisions forth to the larger committee?
I mean, I can say that the ordinance requests us to do a 6-month update to be submitted to the city clerk, and that would be in July. And I know that, for example, Charlestown, they're doing their 250 stuff, and they are very interested and invested in having some branding that Boston is putting out for 250, that they want to start, you know, using. So it would be good to have it within that time frame if possible. But of course, if we can't, if it's too short, then that's fine.
Yeah, because there's a list of a lot of events that are happening now that, you know, again, it goes back to this validating conversation we had earlier. Does having a shingle or something, a stamp or a logo, serve as a form of validation? Charlestown events, is that an officially sanctioned event? Could they belong to something? And how does that happen? And so I think I forgot about that part, Hennessy, you mentioning the events that are happening sooner than later. And so that was also part of the urgency of this conversation too, was to think about how do you how do you have these really, really important and significant events count? I mean, they all count, but count leading up to the 250. You know, a lot of these things are precursors, historic precursors to the 250, and we want to make sure that we're embodying them somehow. So I think that was another driver of this urgency.
See, I think that attempt is amazing though. The way that activates and could animate the lineage of like resistance, those concepts. I think that's because that's what, you know, Mass 250 and Proverb are trying to say as well, is like it's about looking forward as much as the last 250, right? But to Nat's original point, I think we're all kind of discussing it, you know, something that is critical that like an agency, well, I mean, like Proverb does better than anyone else, in my opinion, is how does a brand lead into a value and make it actionable, right? So like they would do all this research around what are we trying to say, and then
Right.
come up with a way to like activate that. Which I think all the subcommittees would probably want that kind of comprehensive work to be done in terms of what are we trying to say, and then you bring the logos out from there, the marks, the language, the messaging. Nat, to your comment that Amari brought up, I've been thinking for a long time about, does it make perfect sense to wed 250 to 400 because Boston's uniquely suited to, and that's a differentiator, or are you conflating two things and therefore inviting confusion or lack of brand consistency or cohesion? So that's something else I think this probably committee in particular is going to have to talk about.
Yeah, I agree with David. First of all, Hennessy, I think you did a great job with that sort of getting us to think about what the visuals look like. I also think that the branding is so critical. If a brand is done well, people notice it. They're like, oh my gosh, but there's not a lot of other comments. And when it doesn't land well, it's a whole other thing, right? And nobody wants, in addition to everything else that we're putting out there, we really want this to land well. So I think that taking the time to have somebody to do some thought work around it, the research, and really use your what you've put together as not what we want to see, but an idea of this is the sort of thinking that we're using, I
Yeah.
think is critical, but also pulling the whole committee and having like 3 conversations. It's 3 meetings. Either you join it or you don't, and let's move on because we don't have time. But I don't want the urgency of what Charlestown is wanting to do to mean that a brand that is so critical for what we're going to be doing the next 18 months, to be that we miss a step, right? In terms of the 250 and 400, it would be different if Boston 400 was 2027, right? Boston 400 is 2030. So they're far enough apart that there's no way I'm conflating the two in my mind. Like I'm not thinking about the two. So I think it needs to be 250 and 400 as 2 very different things because there's 2 very different messages, similar but different messages that are going to be carried with that, and different audiences around that. Just to kind of go back to one of the essential questions that was asked earlier.
Mhm. So I have a question. So my question is, we have an upcoming full commission meeting. We could present the idea, not necessarily the, what I showed you guys, but the conversation that you guys are having, to see what they say, and then open it up for that following meeting in July, I think, to be about that, to be potentially a moment of decision making and moving forward, for the brand, if that sounds like reasonable.
Yeah, I think that could be reasonable. Do we though need to advocate for resources in order to engage an agency or someone to help us with this process? Because then we probably need to think about how we're going to report out with this as one of the most urgent needs that doesn't even wait for our 6-month report. This is like a thing that has been recognized as hugely time sensitive.
Yeah, and it's a conversation that I have to have with Murray, because there is potential that Office of Historic Preservation can take it on under contracted services because there's a budget for that. But I know that is basically usually all for study reports, because getting somebody to write a study report is a significant cost. So I'd have to see, depending on if we go with the agency that that Massachusetts used, and depending on what they would charge us, what flexibility the department has. I'm not sure of what the operating budget is. We haven't discussed it, but there is some potential for that. But yeah. Yeah. And then I will, again, like I said, so I can hold off on reaching out to do it about that design if we want to continue to have a conversation, and I can reach out to them to start building out a website that's not just the Commemoration Commission webpage, but actually looks like the 250 websites that are out there that are more robust and comprehensive, but it would just be brandless for now. And it could go live a little bit.
I would hold off on the launch of the website for Boston
Yeah.
250 until you have a brand. Do it all like Mass 250 did. Do it all at once. That
Okay.
it's a whole unveiling. My suggestion
Right.
for you to consider is to talk about the idea at the April meeting and say, you know, let's move it to a vote of we want to report out that funds need to be directed to some sort of branding like yesterday.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a more diplomatic way to say that, and appropriate for Robert's Rules of Orders, et cetera, et cetera. But that's essentially what we need to get in terms of a motion on the floor, right?
Right.
Get the motion, let's vote on it, and then at the very least, I think you don't have to worry about which office to go to. I think we send it straight to the mayor.
Right.
You go straight to mayor, I think you go straight to city council. This is what we were tasked to do. There needs to be some brand identity. This is an immediate need. And I think we just see what happens. They'll bounce it around anyway.
Right.
I think that's a motion that I think we need to bring forward from this subcommittee to the general body to have a vote on it so that we get some action on it. So we're not waiting till July, because then what they're going to say is there's no money available. Now there's still a little bit of flexibility in terms of, I'm just learning Boston city politics, but there seems to be a little bit of back and forth and negotiation going on right now. So if we can get it on folks' radar now, that would be my suggestion, is that we just submit it to the city council and to the mayor formally after we vote on it next week.
Right. Yeah. Fine.
Yes, well, if we are going to be looking for funding, definitely this is the time, because this is when the budget, and is there anything in any department's budget to deal with this? You know, are there any funds? Because, you know, right now is when the council will have a say, like the last suggestion was to get it to the council, and also the mayor. If the mayor puts it in there, then the council would look at it and say, you know, this is agreeable or whatever. But if we're going to do anything of the sort, then it has to be done right now, because, you know, that process is going on right now. And that's when the funds are allocated, you know. And the other thing, I think the branding is a fantastic thing, but also what the charge is, you know, are we, because I'm, by listening, you know, I know we'll be celebrating all that happened, you know, 250 years ago and 400 and so on. You know, I want to see how exactly do I look at it, because I was looking at it like having a birthday party, you know, 20 years, and you don't just say, oh, I was born this day and I'm celebrating the day I was born, but you know, all that happened through. That's why I'd like to get more, you know, clearly exactly what it is our charge, you know, and what are some of the things that we can do. Even if we take a vote now, are we the appropriate? I mean, this would be a recommendation to the larger and so on. And then looking for funds, clearly the way you get funds in the city is it has to be put in the budget to submit it, and then it has to be in the budget that is debated in the council, and then it goes back and forth and so on. So if it ain't there, you know, now it will be hard to add it, but maybe it can be, or it might be in one of the departments in their budgets, you know, all the ones that have been charged to working with us. So let's make sure we identify that, and then we'll be, you know, in the right place as far as funding.
Well, let me jump in on behalf of the city. Because tourism, sports, and entertainment falls under my scope, this would more than likely be something that would fall within my department. We have not yet been able to allocate resources based on the budget cuts and what has been proposed. So in full transparency, there was already a budget breakfast between the city council and the mayor. And there is a full process, as many of you know, that starts in the fall, that goes through the spring. And I just received a date to testify on behalf of the proposed budget for 24-25 beginning July 1. I have within my notes talking about funding in terms of broad strokes for deeper things that we want to do, with 250 and 400 being a part of that narrative. but not specifically allocating and asking for a budget for 250 alone. It's a larger conversation. So just know that this is on my radar. I'm going to be the person advocating on our behalf, and it is a priority. And it has not been made clear to me as of yet how much we're actually going to get for these things from the city. So I think one of the reasons we're having these conversations is to ensure public-private partnership, because there are some people on here that have other financial resources. So as we see, and you all know this, the city is extremely responsive under pressure when the unfortunately. So when there are folks from the private sector who are like, yo, we're doing X, Y, and Z, and there's an expectation that the city does blank, then it gives us a little bit of fodder to say, yo, I've been on these calls for a year. We have the resources. We have people who have stepped up to the plate, and we as the city need to do more. So I'm not saying that we lean on, this committee to figure out what the next 6 to 8 to 9 to 12 months looks like. But I'm also, I don't think we should solely wait on the city to be proactive as to how we want to collectively approach this work. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that's helpful. But you see, the thing is, are we able to reach out and maybe get sponsors or something? I just want to know exactly what it is that we can and cannot do, because the city sometimes requests donations and so on. They all have to go through the being approved by the council and so on. So there's a whole process. The thing is, if your department doesn't have the funds that are earmarked for this type of thing, then once that moves along a little bit longer, which you said already, that's already on the way. Then, if we're going to hire somebody for the branding or whatever, we have to figure out, where the money is going to come from and exactly what it is that we can do. We hold events that will then, like that event that I was mentioning, with looking at the Sarmiento statue and so on. I know there would be lots of sponsors that would maybe chip in and so on, but I don't know if those are things that we can do. See, I like to get more clear indicate of what it is that we can and cannot do. I know that we're not expected to maybe do the events, or are we? I don't know exactly. So, but I'm very enthusiastic about this, and the thing that makes me enthusiastic is that when we celebrate 250 or 400 or 10 years, that we are inclusive. That's my main thing, and that's why I'm so and the curriculum, making sure that we don't just teach the pilgrims and everything, which was fantastic and all of that, but also the authentic contributions. So, but this is a key point, and this is a key time to talk about it, because once it moves along after June, it's all over.
Well, let me respond really quickly, and I don't want to make this just a back and forth with us. If I've learned anything from the city, it's easiest to get things funded when there's a plan in place, when you've done your due diligence, and when you know what things are going to cost. Right. To lean on the mayor's office, to lean on counselors, to make phone calls to get certain support when we know what the thing is that we're going after, that's a different conversation than saying we need $1 million earmarked for this. We don't know what it's going to be utilized for. We don't know where it's going. We don't know who we're going to hire, but we know we need $1 million. John, why do you need $1 million?
I agree with you 100%. That's exactly what I was.
We on the same page. Yeah. We're on the same page.
Yeah. Yes.
I guess my question is, though, is that the role of this commission? Like, the state commission is very clear. We don't do financing, right? We don't do fundraising or anything around money at the state level. Is that the mandate for this commission or this body? I was not under the impression that that was the role of this. This was more of plans and things like that. But I do think that there needs to be some level of, I understand the need for a plan, and in the best case scenario, having a plan helps things. But if we're saying that brand development is a critical need, even to get someone to spec out a proposal for what it would just to do a baseline cost, is it really worth the effort of having a formal debate and motion set forth from this commission to say, even if they say no, it's on the record that the commission has made this formal recommendation that this happens within the next whatever period of time, right? Best case scenario is we'd have a full slate of ideas. We don't, and we don't have, we're approaching a go, no go scenario, right? For a lot of things. And so I guess the point of clarity is to echo what Juan said is one, is that even within our scope of what we're supposed to be doing on in this commission? And then two, what do we as a group do or do not want to say to the city about some baseline funding to get this thing off the ground? Because we don't have a whole lot of time to make this thing happen.
Kara makes a good point on the chat. I don't know if anyone's read it.
I agree.
Hennessy, quick question.
Mhm.
Is there you instinct or something came up for you to say, or maybe you did it for, maybe we're not that special, you showed this presentation to all the committees, and here we were thinking we were special, getting the VIP treatment on it. But was there something about this committee in particular that the idea of the logo and the branding resonated with you? So that's one question. Second, Dr. Trent, I joined this committee because they told me that the museum was going to help us raise all the money. So that's why I mean, they signed you up, and I was like, sign me up too then.
Oh, you got jokes. You got jokes. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. I hadn't shown it to the other commissions because we met prior to me making this. I made it for because we have
that's special.
Yeah, I think it makes sense because you guys are special, exactly. Because you are tasked with things that are specifically tourism related, and the people sitting from the city side sitting on this subcommittee are the people like tourism, sports and entertainment, or arts and culture. So I think the very visible part of the 250 things. I mean, I think we should show it to the other subcommittees, but and I wanted to update you guys on the other subcommittee. I mean, for right now, legislation and preservation tools is just trying to get Article 85, the zoning code changed, and they're very laser focused on that. And Timelines, Archives, and Curricula, though, they wanted to start front loading events for you guys. And they had a meeting with Jim Rabel, who built out an entire website that has like, oh gosh, I don't even know how many entries, but it's massive. It's a database. It's called Where and When in Boston, and it goes back to like, I don't even know. It's insane. But it's very well thought out. It goes way back and into the present day. It's a database that you can like do a search specific to like Roxbury, Asian American community, and then it'll give you all of these facts in a timeline order, and then it can transition itself into a slideshow with citations. And so the Timelines, Archives, and Curricula subcommittee is like, this is massive. Maybe not going to be the most useful thing for working in connection with the others, with you guys. However, we want to put this as forward as a product that the Timelines, Archives, and Curricula subcommittee endorsed for the commission, and that the Commemoration Commission is endorsing it as well. And they, some discussion about what the prior commissions or whatever entities they were for 200, like what they did, they created the daycare center in City Hall that's currently there. They did a whole bunch of things. They did the passport where you like go to restaurants with coupons and with the hotels and things. And so they are thinking our charges is those events, but it's also some public good. And so they wanted to talk to Do It and to Archives and to whoever can take on the data management of that, because it's so massive, and have it be like something that the universities partner with, so that students who are interested in that kind of work and do more entries for more neighborhoods, for more communities in Boston and really expand it. But yeah, so they were really interested in having a product out for the people and then working with you guys. So I wanted to, then that was my update. I wanted to have this meeting, do the meeting minutes really quickly, and then start scheduling you guys to have some joint meetings with them for the coming rounds, if you guys think that that is appropriate.
Like to make two things as far as the council, you know, how committed they are. I mean, and Kenzie Balk, who is the one that made sure that we had this committee in place. She's part of the committee, and she's very, very aware of how all of the processes go back and forth. You know, the funding, and of course the council president is also a member, also very enthusiastic. And what you just said now, you know, about something that happened before about doing the passport and going, I love that, you know, and you got to see the different cuisines and so on. See, that's the thing that I would get excited about, like having a passport and visit all of the, you know, Latin flavors all over the place, you know, and JP and so on. So things like that, you see, and I just want to know what are the things that we can get enthusiastic about and recommend that can be implemented and so on. So I'm still vague about, you know, what we can do. And clearly the funding piece is important, but I know we have the heavyweights that are part of the committee that are going to be part of the process, because we all know that president of the council is a member of the committee, and also Kenzie Balk and so on and so on. And they are very, very supportive of, you know, making sure we get this as right as possible. I'll stop there.
Quick question on that funding piece, on the timeline, really, the funding piece. So would we be able to, you know, impart this sense of urgency and be like, listen, like by June of 25, like when Bunker Hill is, like, we need to already have had 6 months before that a brand, which means we need to start at least 3 months before that research and background, and therefore right before that come to understanding of like what budget there is to onboard such an agency, which puts us essentially like where we are. Does that work, Hennessy? And I know Director Borders was kind of also mentioning like the sense of urgency works sometimes. Like, could we create that timeline that's back out of it, therefore what we need for a budgetary timeline and commitment?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's appropriate to I think that we should try and then see what happens, instead of, you know, I think, and I only say Charlestown because they're so proactive. They're like, they've organized themselves. They have subcommittees within their, it's insane.
Yeah.
They're like, I think they have a sense of urgency where there was a lot of discussion at first, and now they realize, you know, they don't have that much time. They feel like they don't have that much time, especially because they're gonna be fundraising and grant writing and things like that. And that timeline is moving pretty quickly. And I think if we have a sense of urgency, especially given, you know, everything that that Director John Borders just said, I think it could be appropriate for us to try to move this as quickly as possible. So I don't know.
So maybe Hennessy and team here, maybe by the 30th or right after the 30th, we can draft a letter from the commission to the mayor's office saying, this is, you know, ahead of us giving you a plan, we need branding, and it needs to happen now. And see, I don't know, just coming up with an idea, see where it goes. I'm also a little nervous, Dave, thanks for making me even more nervous, that, I mean, we're talking about Proverb. Does Proverb even have the time to do something like this, and how long will it take them to do it?
Well, I mean, I think to give you perspective, Sheila Green just started with Mott in January. So they can
Right.
turn it. They can. I don't know when the conversation started, but I think that they can turn it around. Agencies can always do stuff for you. It's just
Sure.
how much money are you going to throw at the problem. But the thing I want to just give some context with what David was saying. We actually need to look at April of next year for Paul Revere's ride. Like that's the thing that the rest of so we're really starting from April 2025 and doing the timeline back. So we're a little bit behind, but I think that that sort of urgency. You know, you don't want national cameras here next year at Old North Church and there's no Boston branding.
Mhm.
Not a good look.
I
No,
agree.
Lexington and Concord are way ahead of us too. They've got websites and logos and everything else, so. There is that. We need to move.
And for folks who are smarter than some of us, the rest of us, has the city ever commissioned a different organization to be the lead, not the city? It just seems like there are some inherent challenges of doing it this way, and some bureaucratic limitations and a lack of nimbleness, not on the fault of any individual actor, just because the structure doesn't allow for it to be fast. Has that ever happened before where, you know, like the Philadelphia example where a different entity was stood up where there were actors who were thinking about this 24/7, and not thinking about, because the disadvantage it feels from this position of being a city is that there's like these city interests that differ from the interests of illuminating the 250 from a Boston point of view, and they seem like different things to me. They're both the same and different simultaneously, but the difference is the thing that prevents. If this was an independent entity commissioned by the city to work on behalf of the city on this, the branding, I think to Dr. Trent's point, the branding would have already been done. Like even if they were constituted tomorrow, because the person would be thinking about these things, and volunteer commissioners wouldn't have to be thinking about how in the world are we going to staff these things on top of our normal jobs. And so I think could that be a potential recommendation, also on the list?
Yeah, I mean, I think this having it be a commission is very limiting. I think for 200, it was the Office of the Boston Bicentennial, and then they had
That
outside
makes
partners
sense.
that,
Yeah.
you know, because it gives you so much more leeway to plan things and to collaborate. Whereas with a commission, it seems very limited, and especially with just me. I mean, I would try as I might.
Yeah.
No.
And I think in support of all of your work also, like I wouldn't want to put it on you to communicate that back to the whole city government. So I wonder if there's just like maybe some side conversations or like side outreach that we could have to signal that this is like top of mind and this group is feeling the urgency and some confusion about how we're supposed to move without that coordination or without more support or clarity around funding and resources. But I wouldn't put communicating all of that back on your shoulders. I'm happy to try to figure that out as well. And I'm
think it
sure
would be
John is as well.
Yeah, it would be great if we could use a check-in that we might already have, or you know, schedule a check-in to move something forward on behalf of the subcommittee and on behalf of the commission at large, just to see what we can have happen.
Yeah, because it's hard because we're doing this on behalf of the city. If we were Charlestown, we would just be doing it. Or
Yeah, exactly.
Nate, you're just doing it. And I know from Embraces, we're just doing it. And Dr. Trent, you're just doing it. And but we're trying to do it on behalf of someone where we don't know the parameters that we're allowed to do things, that we have the money to do things. And so that's what makes it difficult. And I think at least I've heard us say, what is our charge at least 10 times in this meeting. And I know we all read it, right? And so it's still not clear to us, I appreciate everything that everyone said. So, and I appreciate you, Hennessy. I know you've been working around the clock on this.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know of a couple of examples, and I don't know exactly where the delineation was, but in Charleston and in Baltimore and in Philly, I believe, there were funds allocated that they were generated out of a municipal entity, but went to more of a private or not-for-profit arm And it was under the auspices of that arm that branding and other things got developed. And the rationale, as I understand it, for that was that it's because it's broader than constituent relations, right? Like these are huge, and now I'm putting on my Meet Boston hat. These are huge visitor commemorations, right? So there's a whole visitor and consumer audience outside of constituent services that we need to attract to create an economic engine for how we're going to commemorate, right? So therefore, in some of those cities, that was understood. So they were able to your question, contract with a more independent agency under those auspices. That agency could make certain branding decisions and whatnot. So I could try to learn more about that from some of our counterparts in those cities. But I know there are some examples of where it was kind of delegated or resourced out because the audience was broader than just the resident vertical. As important as the resident vertical is, let me be clear on that. The resident vertical is the most important one to get buy-in from for how we brand it. But because it is also this like larger consumer / visitor audience, there are other considerations as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a universe where an entity like Meet Boston could temporarily have this as a quasi embedded within there, and members of the commission could be a part of that thought leadership, since there's a level you're already sweating, Dave. So like, I can see it in your eyes. Never mind.
Yeah, I mean, not a quasi, but obviously, and again, like I'm not, there's only certain, I'm not authorized to answer that piece of the question, but like, and again, this has come up with the state commission too. It's like, there is a question of, even if we're not charged with, say, like a fundraising piece of it, if there's areas in which committee members have insights from where branding ideas, fundraising campaigns, underwriting ideas, grant ideas can come from, then we will explore those areas. So that's my answer.
You running for something, man?
No.
All right. Well, I scheduled the meeting for 7:30. So if we want to have some final thoughts.
On Hennessy. Yeah, a colleague mentioned, the Paul Revere event will be coming up. I was waiting for the right time, but this is something that I'm also very interested in. In City Hall Plaza, right near the site of the First Telephone there, Joseph Warren's house was there. And there was a marker prior to until 1954 when they took everything down, urban renewal, and it was never replaced. And that was the house of Dr. Joseph Warren. And at that house is where they had the meeting where they issued, we gotta spread the word and so on. And I know that would be an excellent place to replace the marker. And I know that there's a lot of folks that would do all the fundraising for that. As a matter of fact, I would, commit myself to making sure that those entities would be connected, and it would be authentic history. That's what Dr. Joseph Warren's house was, and they used to meet and so on. And it's right at City Hall Plaza, so it would be a way to bring more people to the plaza and so on. So I want to put that in there because I'd like to try to promote or encourage that is done, a marker at that place where the house was, which was there before, by the way, and it was taken out in 1954. And there's a lot of research about that. And that's it. I just wanted to get that on the record.
That's a great point. Thank you. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, so a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Great. Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Take it easy. Thank you, Hennessy.
Thank you, Hennessy.
Thank you, Hennessy. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Good, everybody.
Bendiciones.